December 8th, 2016, meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee. The meeting will be starting at 6:04. The first order of business is approval of minutes. We have the minutes of December 1st. Recognize someone for a motion.
Move to approve the minutes from December 1st.
Is there a second? Discussion, corrections, additions, modifications? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, unanimously approved. Next item is public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to address the school committee this evening? Please. Just tell us what your name is.
My name is Stephanie Goley, and I'm here tonight. I have 2 kids who attend Chatham Elementary School, and I also have a third child who attends a school out of district. And I'm here tonight because I'm interested in the social-emotional curriculum that's being presented. Last year I was part of the committee to raise money for College Choice to be implemented at Chatham, and I was really disappointed to see that the programs tonight don't include a mindfulness-based program, but I'm interested in hearing what's going to be presented, and I have some questions. After seeing the statistics last year at the Youth Risk Survey, it became more clear to me that we need to do something different for our kids. There were some pretty startling statistics there, and some students engaging in a lot of risky behavior that I think all of us were surprised by, or at least people I know were surprised by. My second grader is one of the students who was fortunate enough to have College Choice 2 years in a row at Chatham, and he represents things that he learned all the time from College Choice. My oldest child attends a school that has had College Choice for as long as we've been here, which is about 4.5 years. And I was really impressed with what College Choice was doing and what they were doing at the school, that I started getting more involved and investigating more, and I'm now a College Choice instructor. So I teach College Choice in other districts, and I get to see firsthand how these kids are implementing it and how they're using it and the differences it makes for them. I've heard from countless parents when I meet them and see them in the community, whose students I have, express how their kids use it at home, how much they love it, how it's really been a great thing for their family. Sorry, I have my notes here. I'm trying to find them. And after seeing all of this, I want my kids to have that experience too. So I started supporting College Choice long before I ever worked for College Choice. And while I'm using it at home because I know it and we use those strategies, it's a lot different when you have a community of people invested and all learning the same thing and all speaking that same language. And I think that College Choice really gives skills that are going to last through their lifetime, and I would really like it to be considered to become part of the school curriculum again. And I don't know if it's possible to ask questions during the presentation of the curriculum. I know that's not typical, or maybe, I don't know, email questions or something about the curriculum. I also have something else that I want to read that Amy Middleton sent to me. She couldn't be here tonight, but she wanted me to read it during public comment. And she says, it was my hope to be at tonight's school committee meeting, but I am attending the play at the middle school. I wrote to all of you some time ago about my support for the mindfulness program College Choice. I was very proud of our district when it was included as a pilot program in the strategic plan. I have seen firsthand the benefits of this unique and vital program in my home, with my Cub Scouts, and with the children in my congregation. I'm deeply concerned about the stress that our children and youth are under, both in school sports and extracurricular activities. Many of them are in a pressure cooker with little to no relief, and very few of them know how to cope with the pressure at such a young age. We learned with great alarm the results of the Behavioral Risk Youth Survey last year. At the roundtable discussion that followed, we heard from our high school students. Many of them cited pressure as being the #1 reason they turned to drugs and other risky behaviors to alleviate some of the stress. This is a program that teaches life skills and coping mechanisms that will prove to be proactive and not reactive. I hope you will seriously consider these benefits and incorporate it back into our schools. So that's all I was here to share today, and I hope this will be taken into consideration. So thank you.
Before you go, did you have some specific questions that you'd like to?
Well, the questions were, I have no idea how it's going to be presented tonight, or if something's being voted on, if this is what you're deciding to spend the grant money on. But some of my questions were, are these the only two programs that are going to be part of the social emotional curriculum for the whole district? If they are, I know it doesn't cover all the students in the district. Those two programs don't, so I was just interested in if there's going to be something else offered. And those are my main program questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is student representatives. I believe we have some students from the Monomoy Middle School.
Brian, can I comment?
Do you want to comment now, or do you want to wait till we're talking about that subject?
Okay, I could have, thanks.
Hi, so I'm Jake Sumner, the liaison for Student Council at Monomoy Regional Middle School.
Welcome.
We recently created a Student Council. This is very new. For us, it's kind of been resurrected, and it's a student government that's going to serve as a go-between or a bridge between the students and the administration, as well as the faculty senate in the near future. So we have 20 really dedicated representatives, and 3 of them are here with us tonight.
Is it bent? There you go.
Hello, my name is Yumi, and I am a 6th grade representing 6th grade student representing the Student Council from Monomoy Regional Middle School. We are excited to say that we started a Student Council. We have created a constitution and elected officers as well. The goal of Student Council is going to benefit the student in our school and help their voice to be heard, as well to promote the school atmosphere and spirit.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liam Jordan, and I'm a 5th grade student representative at Monomoy Regional Middle School. One goal we have is getting feedback from all of the homerooms with surveys and suggestion boxes. We have also created a public relations committee to increase our presence in the school and community.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Britannia Buckner, and I am a student council representative at Monomoy Regional Middle School. Some activities we are planning this year are a lock-in, ice cream social, color wars, and Spirit Week. Spirit Week is a fun week when we dress up differently each day to show pride and school spirit. We will also be planning other fun activities that our homerooms want to do.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for the children? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is recognitions. Mr. Carpenter.
I would like to just quickly recognize Sergeant Kevin Clayton of the Massachusetts Environmental Police, who emailed just yesterday, I believe, and we were able to work with him quickly. He will be coming here in the coming months and working with the middle school students on the early release Wednesdays and Saturdays. Mark, or Principal Wilson, has come up with a schedule that they will be offering a boating safety course for our middle schoolers, which I think is quite appropriate for that. And I have one middle schooler I want to go and put in that, so she'll be ready to go out with Dad too.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Reports and discussions. First is the One to World Chromebook Initiative. Mr. Wilson?
Good evening, school committee members. Mark Wilson, principal of the middle school. Just providing an update from the substantial briefing I gave over the summer about our One to World proposal for 21st century learning at the middle school. Just a reminder to the community at large, we we'd like to place a Chromebook into the hands of every student at the middle school so we can pursue 21st century learning in all our classrooms. And 21st century learning reflects 6 approaches to instruction: collaboration and teamwork, creativity and imagination, critical thinking and problem solving, global and cultural awareness, citizenship and social responsibility, and information, media, technology literacy. We want our students to use their Chromebooks to voice their thoughts about their passions, explain the things they understand well, what about the things they've just begun to understand, and to share and discuss ideas with others. We want our teachers to use their Chromebooks to enhance the differentiation in their classrooms, to be able to reach all types of learners, to encourage our students to be more creative in how they approach their studies, to connect them with current research and experts both within the school and within the global community, and to connect them again with other students in contact groups. One of the things that the committee asked me to do over the summer was we conduct a parent poll to find out how our middle school community felt about the initiatives. And over the fall, we conducted that poll. I'm here to share the results with you. We asked the question so we could differentiate between 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So the answers come back with regard to the specific grade levels. And our first question is, do you want your 5th grader to receive a Chromebook? Of the respondents, there were 51 respondents that had a 5th grader in the middle school. 46 said yes, and 5 said no, and the other 38 respondents didn't have anybody. So we had a very strong, 46 out of 51, or about 92% of our 5th grade parents who responded said yes. The percentage is up a little bit more from that in the 6th grade. 45 out of the 49 respondents said absolutely, and that's about 94%. And at the 7th grade, of the 38 parents with 7th grader in, it was 100% of those who said yes. I will shout out the response rate is valid, given the kind of the statistics for what you look for with a response. And we've got about within plus or minus 10% of the range of probability on that. So when I say 94%, the lowest is going to be about 84 for the rest. And I remind sort of the community, when parents have a reverse opinion, usually if they're strongly against something, we'll know about it. And it's an opportunity for them to reply and say, no, I really don't want my 5th grader to have access to a Chromebook. So I think we have a pretty good summary of what the middle school feels as a whole. We got some additional questions for the parents for how they'd like to have how they want their child to access the Chromebook. That top bar is for use at school only during school hours, so only 8 respondents or 9% of the parents said just at school hours. The second bar is 57%, 51 respondents said for use at school and home only during the school year. So their hope was the majority of the parents say, come summertime, you guys can keep the Chromebooks and let our children be able to roam to Cape Cod and have fun without the Chromebook with them. 35 respondents and 40% said for use at school and home year-round, and then just 3.4% who said they prefer not to have their child have a Chromebook. And the last piece is how they valued the Chromebook, and I'll just focus on the three top answers. How do you see your child benefit? The top 3 responses are fosters 21st century skills of collaboration, creativity, communication, and thinking. The next one, provides a way for students to share and discuss ideas with others. That was 74%. And the third strongest bar there was organizes assignments and tracks due dates so that we can help our middle school students make sure that they get their work done on time and not lose their agenda book or their assignments when they're sitting at home. Say, hey, I don't have my assignment. They can just jump on the Chromebook and we'll be there for them as long as they have access to the internet, they have access to the work. And given that we'll be providing the assignments through the web, if they don't bring their book home, that's fine. It's still available. It's going to be right on the assignment. So those pieces where middle school students forget sometimes what they're supposed to be working on and can't reach their friends, they can still reach their work. I also provided the school committee with just a one-page summary and briefing handouts on sort of talking points. So if you have anybody asking what we're trying to accomplish, I try to summarize it in a very succinct way with regard to what we're trying to accomplish through the goal of our Chromebook initiative. There's 4 bullet points of the major things we're trying to accomplish. And then what we expect for immediate and long-term changes in our school culture as a result. It's a fairly meaty document, so I'm not going to just read it out loud. I'll rather be questions and answers about kind of the purpose for the goal. And something you don't have, because we just got the quote today, so I'll distribute to the committee what the committee had asked me to find out is how much would this cost if we were to purchase a new Chromebook for every student in the building and be able to phase that in over a 3-year lease. And I have that quote with you, so I'll just pass that along and share it around. This particular quote would be for 500 Chromebooks. That would be enough for our entire student body to receive one when they walk in the door next fall. This particular Chromebook is designed for middle school students. It's got a more rugged screen and will not break as easily as some other screens that are a cheaper model. And it has a more rugged case for it with some bumpers on it, so when you drop it, it'll withstand the wear and tear of a middle school student. If anything is designed to do that, they're giving it a shot. And so the total price for that with the software that allows us to control the educational environment for the Chromebooks would be $143,000 for the quote. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Scott?
So knowing my daughter and how she is, and when she drops it, what would happen if it gets broken to the students? What's going to be the cost to the parents?
I believe the quote says it's $75 for a screen repair, I believe is how that works. I don't have those specific figures. Let me talk strategically about it. Right now, this would put 500 into the hands of students. Over the course of the last 2 years, the school building has purchased 175 total, though that we have right now, and they're either 1 or 2 years old at the end of this school year. Those would be available for loan while students are actually getting their broken Chromebook repaired. So we do have enough sort of capacity on site. I would hope that we never have more than 33% of the devices unavailable to us. So that does allow, and we kind of anticipated that we don't want students learning to stop something because something has happened to the device. The staff shared a thought that they'd asked me to pass on to you, is that the Chromebook would only go home for those households that don't have another device at home, which is a relatively small number of homes in the middle school. It's about 6% of our student body report that they don't have access to the internet through some other device at home. So that would limit the amount of transport to and from school. That may help in the long run. So we have that, we have that philosophy as well if we wanted to go that route.
Ms. Stowe?
That last part that you said could be a problem because there are parents that do their work on their computer and stuff, and they wouldn't allow their child to use it for free.
No, pretty much the student Chromebook would be, if they need to use it at home to be able to access their work, they're welcome to take it home. It would be their component to come and go as they need to.
Mr. Russell?
Mark, do we have a handle on the percentage of homes in the district that have Wi-Fi access?
I know 6% of the homes don't have access. I didn't ask a Wi-Fi question. We asked us to follow up with regard to, we asked computer access as opposed to Wi-Fi access. So I'll have to ask a follow-up question to find out who doesn't have Wi-Fi, who's got a hard line but don't have the Wi-Fi access. I'll get it for you.
Anybody else? Mr. Wilson, following up on the Wi-Fi question, Chromebooks essentially, I know they have a small solid-state hard drive, I believe. Is it anticipated that they will necessarily have to have internet access when they're using it at home?
You wouldn't be able to access the assignments you need to get to without internet access.
So there won't be anything actually downloaded onto the Chrome?
No, other than the software we'd like the students to be able to access.
I wonder if in determining how to pay for this program, whether we have to take into consideration the possibility of perhaps subsidizing people's Wi-Fi connectivity I mean, if the students can't use it at home because they don't have Wi-Fi, they'll certainly be at a disadvantage over the other students.
One of the things we can do is advertise a service that's provided by the Wi-Fi providers to households that are from economically struggling backgrounds. They're eligible for a significantly discounted rate for Wi-Fi access. They just need to contact their Wi-Fi provider and share that information, and they're then eligible for it. It's $10 a month. It's substantially less than what most households would pay for the access.
Following up on Scott's question about damage, when in your polling of the parents, was there any discussion about whether they would agree to be responsible for the damage to the Chromebooks? Is that a consideration that they had when they were deciding how popular they thought the idea was?
I didn't put it up front that, there was to be a breakage.
I don't know if there will be.
Because I didn't have that specific information. It kind of has come through conversations with Jim and especially kind of how things are being handled at the high school at the moment when there's a breakage in the screen and how that's sort of coordinated where a student drops off and pays a fee in order to get the screen replaced, both for the screen and the labor.
I'm just wondering if who's going to be held responsible if they're mishandled by the student, whether that's part of the plan, and whether that was represented to the parents.
I did not put that piece out in terms of the overall proposal.
Okay.
There are plans that you can buy for insurance for Chromebooks that actually, kind of cover that piece. Most of those are not that the school will broker that, but it would be the individual household that takes out an insurance plan on the Chromebook as a way to kind of protect themselves from costs.
Anybody else? Mr. Russell?
Follow up, Mark, on the total price of ownership is $143,000. And so the committee needs to find that if it's got a positive task, which I agree, I think would be a terrific thing. Assuming we have some difficulty finding that number, would there be a logic to look into a phase 1, phase 2, and have the grade 5 kids in total have X for the price that we come up with, and the next year have the next 2 grades? Whatever formula we can come up with that, I don't want to jump to that, but right away, that's 6 figures.
However we can get to the end goal, we're patient, we'll get there one way or the other. Certainly within the bounds of what needs to be done for the community and fiscal responsibility. That's kind of up to the finance subcommittee and school committee to determine that.
Anybody else? Mr. Carpenter?
To sort of loop back to budget conversations that we had at our last school committee meeting. One of the options that we have explored is actually leasing the devices. So what we presented last week was how much the cost would be if we actually leased these over the course of 3 years, which is a significantly smaller number, although then you're having that in the budget. So it's one of those things that we can also try to work with our towns on. Do we have a single capital outlay that then keeps that money out of the budget in subsequent budget years, or do we have a number that's closer to about $35,000 that then gets annually built into the budget to have the Chromebooks leased and renewed every 3 years?
Try it.
If the Chromebooks were purchased outright at $143,000, I mean, in 3 years, for probably between 3 and 4 years, they're going to become obsolete anyway. You're going to have to buy new ones. So it makes more sense to lease them. So it's a capital outlay, but it's not a one-time outlay. It's something that's going to come up every 3 years, 4 years.
Anybody else? Thank you.
One quick, just so you know how it works at the moment, we've got 7 Chromebook carts at the middle school. There's one for each team, and then one for the U8, our unified arts teachers as well. So at the moment, they have shared access across 4 teachers. They're sharing one cart at 25. Okay.
How familiar are the teachers with using Chromebooks?
We've been doing a lot of professional development over the course of the year. We have a monthly Google Classroom workshop where staff swing by and as a collaborative group work on those skills to be able to get ready for the integration Chromebook initiative. A lot of our teachers have written SMART goals that they're going to create assignments this year through the Google Classroom platform and then push them out to students. So they're going to try to do 1, 2, or 3 assignments over the course of the year so they used to be able to get the students the assignments through that. The kids love it. Frankly, they're very comfortable in accessing those assignments through the Chromebook and being able to work with them and annotate text, give comments to each other about the text. Staff are different levels of professional development. So some of our more veteran staff who are experienced with it are providing PD through faculty PD meetings and through the once a month club.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
I think you're next up then, right, for the middle school seminar block?
There's a question came up. This is one of our larger initiatives in the school for the year. It's a seminar block where we're really using it some time within our school day to customize our students' education. All of our students have 7 classes each day. They're core academic area classes of science, social studies, math, and English. A couple of our unified arts classes like art or music or PE or health. And then we have a seminar block, and we're using that strategically to provide, customize our students' pathway through the school day. We create those seminar classes to address each student's unique needs or interests. And it comes as a result of looking at some of the data that was generated from the measures of academic progress assessment that the school committee supported in the budget, and that we put into place for the first time in September. We'll take a look at that data and their classroom performance, and students who share a particular need for a skill like solving a multi-step math problem, or constructing an effective argument, or reading charts, tables, and graphs and using those to develop and defend an opinion. We'll group those together to receive targeted assistance and support during seminar block. And students who already have those skills get a chance to apply their learning through project-based activities and that require critical thinking. Some of the courses we're running is writing, directing, producing films, observing the sky and taking astrophotographs, designing, building, and piloting remote-operated vehicles with the summer blocks. We've got some, in addition to that, with aquaculture, stagecraft. So there's a whole bunch of things that I haven't mentioned there that are in your handout that I gave you for a description of all the courses that we're running. And those summer classes are dedicated to enrichment and extension. To create those performance groupings, we looked at MAP to put them together. So starting on November 14th, that was when our first summer block was up and running, so we're kind of in about our 4th week in. And for our intervention blocks, class sizes run between 5 and 7 students. And for our enrichment classes, class sizes run between 18 and 24, depending on the offering. It's all hands on deck. It's one of the things I love about this. We've got everyone's teaching a class. I'm teaching a class. Mr. O'Shea is teaching a class. We've got that allows us to create the kind of class sizes that works for intervention. We had a faculty meeting yesterday where we had their first feedback from staff about our seminar blocks, and the staff are absolutely loving the fact that they get to work for 45 minutes with a group of 5 or 6 or 7 kids to be able to remediate some specific skills. For myself, to speak from my experience, I've got 21 5th graders that I'm working with on a seminar called Environmental Issues and Challenges. We're exploring such issues as fracking and the explosion of the lionfish population along the eastern seaboard. So there's been some really fantastic conversations and instruction that's happening during this 45 minutes. I just realized it's going to be hard for you to see, but I'll do what I can. Every student has received a student goal setting as a result of the MAP testing, the measures of academic progress. So they've got the top bar here that you see in front of you is the mathematics score for a particular student, and the bottom one is reading. And you'll see some colored bars if you're sitting in the audience. I'll explain what those mean. For the math score at the top, you'll see that the first line that's got the yellow bar is operations and algebraic thinking. The next line is a green bar, it's numbers and operations. Third bar is measurement and data. And the fourth bar is geometry. For this particular student, they have relative strengths, those are the green bars, in numbers and operation and geometry, and opportunities for growth in operations and algebraic thinking and measurement and data. So we took this information, created instructional groupings, 4 or 5 students who need some support in measurement and data are grouped together, and they're getting direct instruction on measurement and data. That's how we're using this information to structure our classroom seminars. On the bottom one, on the reading, you'll see that this particular student, the green bar, they have a strength in informational text, and they have an opportunity for growth in literature. So again, we group together and we work with those students to give them some skills that they need. This particular sheet I love because the students get it, and there's a couple lines there for them to make a student action plan. So they actually specifically need to know their data, know their strengths, know opportunities for growth, and put in some specific steps they will do to address their areas for growth. So they'll write down, even the students with me have identified texts that they're going to read between November 14th and January 30th. And at the end of that time, they'll reflect on, A, did they get them read, and B, how did it help them grow in the area that they could use some strength. This is actually a fantastic report that we get out of the measures of academic progress. The last thing I'll point out to you is on the reading. There's a Lexile range. Lexile refers to what students can read independently and comprehend with at least 75%, 75% comprehension. Here's a profile of 2 students that are in the 5th grade. One of our students, their independent reading level, their Lexile range is 195 to 345, and they are reading independently at home without support. They could read books like The Red Riding Hood or Thanksgiving on Thursday. Other students, this particular one has a Lexile of 115 to 1,115 to 1,200. That student can independently read a separate piece by John Knowles or Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. I've chosen these 2 students as examples so you see A, the importance of differentiation in our classroom instruction, and B, how the seminar block helps address the specific learning needs of students. So I've given you kind of the range on the outside, but I think it's a good illustration of the opportunities we have to address students where their growth opportunities are and hit them where, give them good opportunities where they're reading well. That's the goal of our seminar block. It's the first time we have specifically taken steps as a school to group students for 45 minutes each day to give them opportunities for specific instruction, and so far it's gone well, and we anticipate that this initiative will go a long way to helping us jump over where we have been on the statewide assessments for learning come April, when we're taking the next generation MCAS, and we can move above being a school where results are average and start to be a school where results are extraordinary.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Richardson.
I love this model. When I pre-read it at home, I could hardly wait for this time to come up because this just, it just seems to be an ideal model to hit a variety of levels, to apply what they have learned, and yet having so many kids involved, I just can't say enough. You know, they given a manual? I don't know how that works.
When you say trained about how to interpret the map scores,
like,
or
no, like say they have the enrichment group and they're pursuing higher level activities.
So each of the teachers that are teaching a seminar block will get a profile of all the learning profile of all the students that they're teaching. So they'll be able to see commonalities. So these students are all with you and they're all strong at, I'll just use operations and algebraic thinking, but they're ready for some 3 and 4 step, multi-step mathematical problem solving. So that's what they're going to design. So they're going to use the materials that we have available through Math and Focus or other resources in the building to be able to give those students those experiences that are going to be at the right instructional level. One thing that I'm going to connect these 2 things now, the Chromebook piece and this go together very well. I'm going to give you for instance, if I'm sitting in a classroom with the 2 students that I described with the Lexile level, traditionally, if I'm handing out an assignment, I'm giving you a reading, I'm giving you a reading, I'm giving you a reading, and each one of you, you're going to see that, I'm either giving you the same reading or I'm giving you a different reading based on your reading ability. The nice thing about a Chromebook is I can differentiate the reading and no one will ever know that I'm actually changing the reading so that it matches your reading ability. And I can use technology to do that. There's a new software called News ELA that allows me to take any text and actually restructure it so that it's at the right lexile level for a student. We could take a college piece of text, break long compound sentences into simpler sentences, substitute easier words for more complex words, take the word candor and substitute the word honesty for it so that a student can still access the text without having that background. If they don't know where the candor, but they know the word honesty, I can just use technology to change the text and still make the same thing accessible to that student. So it's a pretty powerful combination of targeted instruction and using technology to tailor the education for each kid.
Mr. Russell?
Mark, I commend you. I echo Donna's comments. For a lot of years, we tripped over a way to do something like this years and years ago with larger numbers. Let's see if I understand this correctly. The seminar program, grade 5 through 7, is every day?
Yes.
And the core teachers, their time on learning contractually, you have just carved out the minutes so that there's 40, 45 minutes per day where they're getting remediation via the prescription.
Yep.
So instead of, it's getting clearer, so that I can go, excellent. So that those youngsters who need that, say, let's say math, they're with their team math teacher.
Yes.
So you're not inter-teaming kids based on a skill, but in fact, these 5 youngsters, we've talked to, and you're gonna be with me today, whereas 10 or 12 other youngsters are gonna be going to 5 or 6 stage making with you.
Yes. Our seminar blocks can run across team, not across team, but upstairs in 5th grade it can because of the way it's structured. But generally, you're staying on team with your own students. You're just being grouped with kids that need the same sets of skills. Yeah. So we'll have some students that could use some support in math and ELA. So on days 1, 3, and 5, they're going to get an intervention for math, and on days 2, 4, 6, they're going to get some intervention for the other subject for mathematics. So we just flip back and forth. And we do have some students on our seminar block is the same time we offer band or chorus. So students can get enrichment or seminar and then take band chorus on the other day. And just to be upfront with the community, we do let households know that if we have a student with a concern about their academic performance, we'll state right up front, we have a concern, here's what our concern is. Your child's enrolled in band or chorus now. We're recommending enrichment, but we're leaving the choice as to whether you have them pursue band and chorus or take the enrichment, take the intervention up to the household. But it comes with our recommendation that they actually put band or chorus on hold for a moment and then take care of the academics first.
Certainly beats having extra help after school for an hour.
Built in, that's our goal.
So it'll be great in another month or 2 to see if there's some targeted kids who are struggling with math or language arts skills, to see if this small tutorial begins to do the trick.
We will reassess every student with MAP in January. The challenge for this from administration is every 2 months we are rescheduling the entire student body. So all 432 kids, we're going to reassess where do they need to be, has there been any fallback, who's advanced and ready to move from enrichment from intervention until enrichment. So it's exciting work, but it definitely shifts kind of how we schedule students during the course of the school year.
Anybody else? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sounds excellent. Next item on the agenda, anti-addiction, anti-opioid grants. Ms. McGuire.
Good evening. Melissa McGuire, Director of Student Services. And my hope is that my voice stays for the full presentation. So if it doesn't, I have a really good excuse why it doesn't. Tonight I'm presenting to you on 2 grant opportunities that are available through the state. One is through the Safe and Supportive Schools, through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the other is through the Attorney General's office. So when we're looking at grants, and especially these are very specific to anti-addiction and anti-opioid programs, there are several things that we want to focus on in understanding what the needs are. First, we need to address concerns seen in the online risk and youth behavior survey results, which we continually look at to see how we can address those needs. We need to make sure that programs are evidence-based. There needs to be a proven track record of reducing use or addiction. And it meets the 16 prevention principles addressing risk and protective factors identified by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And we've given you that link to look at those factors. Also, we need to look at the capacity to continue the program after the grant ends. One grant is a 2-year grant cycle, and the other one I'll talk about is just a current year cycle. And then, of course, the last thing is the cost effectiveness of the model in being able to build the capacity and having a trained trainer who can continue the work without having to worry about whether or not there's a continued cycle of grants. So the 2 grants, the first one through the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is specifically called the Anti-Addiction Programs. And we had submitted the grant and it was awarded. However, the day after it was awarded, we did get news that there's some pending 9C cuts, and that is right there in the recommendations for cuts. And unfortunately, the contact, the person I've worked with for years through Safe and Supportive Schools, is on vacation. I don't know if that was purposeful, that she took it before the 9C cuts, but so we don't really have any information. However, it was approved, but obviously it's on hold. That program, that grant, we looked at the Botkin Life Skills Training, and that spans elementary, middle, high school transition. And what I really, really liked about this program is as a parent training piece, which very few programs have a parent component to it. So I was excited about that. The second grant through the Attorney General's Office is the Youth Opioid Prevention Grant. That's a 2-year grant. Initially, I was looking, or we were looking at requesting about $15,000 for a program called Preventure, Positive Choices, which addresses treatment. Difference between the two, BOTFIN is an educational program for anti-drug addiction. Preventure is a treatment program for students of high risk. So given some concern about the 9C cuts, we may look at trying to piggyback some of what we put into this grant through the department onto this grant through the Attorney General's Office. That's due next week, so we have some room to hopefully be able to get everything we need. So the BOTFIN Life Skills Training is evidence-based. It's one of the most comprehensive and rigorously tested prevention programs in America today. A summary of the studies supporting the evaluation of the program can be found at this website. And I do have an example of one of their studies. One of their studies that included 452 students from 12 public high schools indicated there was a 52% fewer daily substance users in intervention condition compared to the controlled group. The conclusions drawn from the study were that daily substance use can be prevented in high school students using a competence enhancement approach that addresses key risk and protective factors, and the prevention approaches that are effective for middle school students can also be effective for high school students if adapted to be developmentally appropriate. And these are some of their statistics in terms of the students who were in the control group versus the treatment group, in the various drugs, tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, polydrugs, and methamphetamines. In terms of the treatment groups, the reduction shows a significant decrease in the use of those substances. So and I'm not going to read all of these, but because you certainly have the handouts available, but the 3 key components that the BOTFIN program has are the personal self-management skills, general social skills, and drug resistance skills. And it spans in 3 different programs, which is grades 3 to 8, and then grades 9 and 10, and then there's a transition program, which is really nice because on top of looking at some of those self-management skills and social skills, they're also building skills on what are you going to do when you leave high school, really helping students to understand how to manage their time, how to apply for jobs, and be able to strengthen those skills once they transition out of their educational program. I didn't put the parent group up, parent program up here. That has a different, it has a whole different set of objectives, so I wanted to focus on the student objectives. So the structure of the program in the elementary grades 3 through 5, There's 8 class sessions per year, meaning 8 sessions during 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. They're 30 to 45-minute classes. And then grades 6 through 8, they have level 1, 2, and 3. As you notice that each grade has 15 class sessions, another grade has 10, and then the last one has 5, and that's a booster session because they're building upon those skills across all of those grades. And then 9 and 10, they have 10 class sessions, and then the transition program has 6 sessions. And here I did put the parent sessions. There are 4 sections of the training that's provided to parents. Preventure. One of the nice things about Preventure is it is a treatment program, and the statistics, although their research is truly kind of a hardcore research when you read it, so sometimes it's difficult to understand it, but what we really liked about it was really their treatment effect. The New York Times did an article, excuse me, on Preventure as one of the most successful programs in other countries. And there's a title of the article is 4 Traits That Put Kids at Risk for Addiction, and that link is there. So the structure of that program in terms of a school-based intervention is it's aimed at reducing adolescent ages 13 to 18 drug and alcohol use in high-risk teenagers. Students with high-risk personality profiles, as identified by a screening questionnaire, are invited to participate in 2 90-minute group workshops. The workshops focus on motivating adolescents to understand how their personality style leads to certain emotional and behavioral reactions, and I'll talk a little bit about those traits. So the 4 different workshops that are run, and depending on your screening and the type of behaviors that come out of it, they focus on these 4 areas for coping skills, so sensation seeking, impulsivity, anxiety sensitivity, and negative thinking. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So with the benefits for in any of those groups in which you're receiving treatment, the benefits are reduced alcohol consumption, delayed initiation of alcohol use and binge drinking, reduce the likelihood of initiating illegal drug use, and reduce the frequency of illegal drug use. So one study, the reduction of drinking demonstrated in school-wide survey results, including both high risk and low risk. Although what they're suggesting is that the program is for high risk, it doesn't obviously prevent those who are also low risk as well as to receiving this treatment. The number of respondents, and this was over a 24-month period of time, so the group of students that were provided the survey over time, the response decreased, but the percentage of students reporting non-use is substantial. So in the first, you can see in the first response, 1,217 students responded, and of those students, 53.1% reported non-use at that time, 6 months post-intervention. And then it goes 12 months post-intervention and so forth. So those are pretty significant statistics for students to be able to indicate that they are reporting non-use of drugs. Another finding of 6 months after prevention interventions, there's so many more benefits that we know for students that require treatment. For this particular survey, there were 2,696 students surveyed. 423 of those students were identified as high risk and participated in the intervention session. So the results and what they looked at are the following. Significantly reduced binge drinking rates in students who are drinkers. It was a 50% rate, so for every 2 students, 1 said that there was a decrease in their sensation-seeking, binge drinking, was prevented. That's a pretty high statistic. Significantly reduced shoplifting rates for students who participated in impulsivity intervention. Significantly reduced truancy rates in students who participated in the anxiety sensitivity intervention. And for students who participated in the sensation-seeking intervention, reduced the quantity and frequency of drinking in comparison to the control group, which actually increased over time. Reduced reckless behavior for those getting the sensation-seeking or impulsivity intervention. Reduced depression scores in students who participated in the negative thinking intervention. Reduced panic attack rates in those who participated in the anxiety sensitivity intervention. So the benefits go beyond just the use of drugs. It supports students with other mental health challenges and reducing those challenges for them. Of course, what we look at too is all of these things of how they can access their learning. And when we reduce all of those risk factors for them and we increase the protective factors, they're in school more, they're engaged more, and they're less likely to have these addictions. So in terms of the endorsements, Botvin has several endorsements. One, which is the one that is most recognized and most used in terms of programs and evidence-based, is SAMHSA, the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. So Botvin and Preventure are both endorsed by that organization. The National Institute on Drug Abuse for Botvin, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the Office of National Drug Control. So that's important to look at that and making sure that when we're identifying programs that they're meeting the standards. And of course, the principles that we talked about earlier, also you will see those in SAMHSA as well. So that is the end of the presentation of the two grants, and I'm happy to take questions.
Ms. Stout.
I'm not familiar with either of these. The data you give looks interesting. It looks really good. Do you have copies of these that we can peruse before we vote on them?
I'm not sure this is a vote because they're grants, so I guess that would need clarification from the chair.
If it's curriculum, it is. And the MASC said any new curriculum we have to vote on. If it's
We won't be
new.
voting on it tonight, that's for certain.
No, I understand that. But I am just asking if there's
I'm not-
samples we can look at. Yeah.
Just so that we're clear, we don't know yet whether this is going to be considered to be a curriculum item for which the school committee has the authority. Obviously, we've approved a strategic plan in which we've included a strategic plan that we need desperately, well, I wouldn't say desperately, but we strongly believe that there's a benefit to a program of this type. But let's hold off on the question of what the school committee's role is until we know for sure.
Okay. Is there something of this that we can look at?
Actually, Botvin has a fantastic sample of the curriculum across all four and the parent on their website, which you have on the PowerPoint. They actually did a really nice job with the sample curriculum, so or program. I'm going to call it a program versus curriculum because it's a program. And Preventure also has, if you go to their website as well, there's a lot of information about their treatment program. That's not curriculum, it's a treatment program. And that's really what we're looking at, are programs in which to address diverse needs of students. This particular, both state grants, really the focus is on anti-addiction and anti-opioid, but ultimately what we're looking at is suicide prevention. And that is the underlying piece that for anything that we do, we need to get to is ensuring that whatever we're doing for students under social emotional, learning and or under something that is funded by a grant through anti-addiction, that we need to make sure that we're addressing those needs.
So the first, if I have this correctly, the first one you're talking about is for all kids in a grade, but the second one is only for high-risk students.
Botvin is a program that spans grade 3 through high school, and then again the parent portion of it. So it's a program prevention piece. The Attorney General grant, what we're looking at is a treatment piece. So we want to capture both. We want to have a treatment program available for students, and we also want to look at preventative programs.
Do you know on either of these or both of these if they have an experiential piece where the students not just cognitively learn information but practice skills?
Well, there are activities that are associated with the sessions and expectations for the students. Of course, at the younger levels, what they're looking at is really that first, which is interesting, identifying, what is a drug. So even at the younger levels, the first lesson, they talk about tobacco. What is tobacco? And it's interesting because part of the conversations that happen and part of some of the data are, children responding to what they see at home and, do the parents smoke, or do the parents drink, or, being able to understand what those things are, and being able to make good choices along the way, and as you move up through the program, really making good choices, understanding those choices as you get into the older. So really is kind of identifying and learning what it is.
I did see that they talk about something to do with helping anxiety. And
Yes.
that's-
So a lot of, which is nice, because you'll see a lot of the standards for many of the programs, that really what they're looking at is that self-management piece, that self-regulation piece. And if you recall, when I did the social emotional learning, those are the top 2 tiers of social emotional learning is self-management, self-awareness, those pieces. So all of these programs are looking at making sure they incorporate those pieces, self-regulation, those kind of skills.
Are we looking at this first program as being the social skills program, or just one phase having to do with prevention of substance abuse?
So this specifically addresses the requirements of the grant, which is the anti-addiction. So in my previous presentation, when we talked about social emotional learning, what we need is, we need a breadth of curriculum and programs to support students in their social emotional learning. There is not one. There's nothing that is a, one all be all. That we have to really understand all of the needs and the diverse challenges that students face, and build in programs and build in our culture how we address those needs. So there isn't a program that I would expect, or any of us would expect, would be just a program. We would be looking in and researching and really making sure that all students have access to social emotional learning, and we're delivering that instruction in a way that meets all of their needs.
I was going to say something earlier because of the Commerce Choice woman that came up here. And I'm a huge supporter of that program because it's so experiential, so it's learning and they practice it. And I'm hoping that in some of our grades, we can put that. I know this starts at grade 3, but I hope we can integrate some of that into there.
Mr. Russell.
Thanks for the presentation, understandable and clear. A couple of questions. With the Potvin program, starting at grade 3 through 5, all the way up, there would be, in general, 8 class sessions and then 10 class sessions and another 6 class sessions. Specifically, what staff would be trained to present those, and also, what's the cost of training those particular staff people?
So the grant supported 5 people being trained trainers for these programs. So what we did is we will have an elementary, actually 2 elementary and middle, and probably 2 high. The trainers, what's nice about this program, can train anyone in our school. And that's what we're looking for, is to really build capacity. So of course, a lot of that curriculum is in the health. So we might look at, and of course, because we just got the grant, but we will look for that person who really wants to train other teachers on how to implement this in their classrooms, and develop a capacity and a strategic, plan over time on the implementation. So what I really, really liked about it, the cost was one of the lowest costs in terms of sustainability, because it's a program where you do not actually have to go back over time to maintain that certification. For example, I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I'm required to teach 3 classes a year to maintain my certification, or I'd have to go back. Similar with BOTFIN, the fidelity is that you need to teach minimally one session a year, not one session, but the full program session. So whether it's 8, the 10, or however many sessions, you're required to do that. You're required to even do that before you go to the train the trainer. So there's so the grant is supporting all of this, going and taking the first step, which is the elementary, the middle, the high, and the parent. And then after you take that, in March there's a train the trainer where you go, and it's in New York, where they go and then they are training those trainers how to in fact teach it to teachers to implement. So it's a really nice sustainability program.
Just a follow-up question. Would Potvin provide consumables, materials as part of this $14,007 grant?
It's in the grant for all the materials that we need, and then some. So we were able to put in the grant more kind of materials in terms of the handbooks. Now, the kids that wouldn't be taking with them, they would be used for instruction, so we put into the grant more than enough to be able to support all the kids across the grades.
Ms. Ryder?
I have several questions. I'm not sure who to address this question to, but, so these are programs, they're not part of our social emotional learning curriculum. How are we fitting in the programs considering time constraints? I don't know who to ask that to.
Well, again, what we would be doing is developing a schedule of implementation in classrooms for that instruction. For the BOTVN, pre-venture is treatment. So those are students who would be receiving, those 2 workshops in those 4 domains that they spoke about. But the BOTVN and in terms of the sessions, we would be and that's what was in the grant, obviously, is developing a planned schedule for the implementation of those sessions.
Okay, so if we have sessions that are taking place during class time, that is curriculum, is it not? I'm not asking you specifically, I'm just asking the question because to me that seems like curriculum if we're taking time out of the kids' schedule. Is that not true?
Does it occur during
It would occur. It would occur as part of kind of our natural schedule of instruction, whether, it's similar to the seminar block, we would be, developing a plan for how that would be implemented during the school day.
Mr. Carpenter, we have time on learning concepts that we follow. How does this affect that? Would this be in lieu of time on learning, or would it?
I think it would be, depending on where it is. I know already if you are taking middle school health, that Sherry is one of the teachers for, and it's one of our teachers had sort of an introductory exposure to BOTVN, and a lot of those concepts are already embedded in that curriculum that's been developed. So I think it's really looking at where the different life skills fit within the different things that we're teaching us. I think it's not a full social emotional curriculum. It's a piece, and I think that's what Melissa was trying to get at. It's a piece of a broader social emotional program.
Ms. Ryder?
If it's a piece of the social emotional curriculum, what are the other pieces?
Oh, that's a long conversation, because as we look at all of those domains and all the guidelines and guidance that DESE is giving to develop a social emotional curriculum or learning, so to speak, and it's not so much just curriculum. It's different ways in which we are on a daily basis providing students with social emotional learning. It's the way we culturally in our buildings use language, teach perspective taking, teach those social skills, and we can use a variety of methodologies to do that. So it's not, there's not a book. Like you get a science book and you have a full breadth of science curriculum in grade 5, and that's what you use and you follow it. For social emotional learning, you don't. There's not a curriculum to speak of. There's guidance, and you have to assess in your own schools what those student needs are. And then you take from that, and you look at who is doing what to address all of those different needs, and what is evidence-based, what is sustainable in terms of our building capacity, what are those skills that we need to teach kids, how do we differentiate that for students who have learning challenges. So it's a very large conversation, and it's a deep look at over time how we continue to develop those learning skills for students. And there's multiple ways to do it, but we want to make sure that we're thoughtful in that, and we're thoughtful in how we choose what we're doing to address the specific needs. And that's always my concern is that it's not just one thing. It's many things we have to look at and how we integrate. And sometimes it's not about how we integrate it into the classroom itself. It's how we integrate it into our culture of our school.
Ms. Ryder?
So from what you've said and from what Scott has said, and the program itself that I looked at has a certain number of sessions. They run for, I believe, 45 minutes, maybe 30 minutes for the younger kids. That is a shift in curriculum. And I'm just saying this not specifically to you, but in general, that is a curriculum shift. This is part of social emotional learning. I believe this is something that we need to look at. My next question is, what other programs did you look at that you did not choose?
I have a spreadsheet. I looked at the ones specifically that were endorsed through the department. There are some things that we are doing. For example, at the high school, we're doing Signs of Suicide, the SOS program. They'll continue to do that again this year. That's with the support of Sheila House. So these are programs that we are implementing. At the middle school, we have the CBERT. That, I believe, is coming up. There's pieces of programs that we're looking at. And I honestly, right now, couldn't run through everything. I would have to bring my binder, and I'm happy to share all of the different programs that I looked at. But I did look specifically at the range in which programs deliver support to students, and Boston has the largest range of any program I researched, including, to me, which is critical, is the parent piece. We need to provide parents that level of support and that level of instruction as well sometimes, similar to where we'll be offering mental health first aid to parents. That component was huge. There isn't that component in most of the programs that I saw. So the range was the largest, and the endorsements were the largest for the evidence-based.
I would be interested to see what other program that you looked at,
Sure.
and why you decided this one was better.
For that very reason, I just said I can tell you why, because it had
Because
the
of what you
largest
just
span, it had the most evidence in terms of its success, and it had the most endorsement in terms of its evidence. But the piece of that far outweighed anything was the span for which the ages of students it supported.
Could you tell me about the methods? I actually looked at the website, but I had a hard time. There's something wrong in their back end. It just kept crashing everything I had open. The teaching methods are based on, from what I saw, it looked like it was a combination of paper and computer, not a real person really doing that much of the teaching. Could you speak to that a bit?
Actually, what happens is there's 2 live sessions, so there's a 2-day training. And what happens is you have 2 live sessions, face-to-face, meaning in a virtual classroom, but the teacher is live with you. So on the first day, you have live with the teacher, and on that same day, because it's a full day, you are expected to continue with the modules. And then on the second day, again, you continue the work, and then you have a live module. Are you talking about the training?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought you were going down the wrong track. What I was asking was, when the training is being provided to the classroom of kids, that's what I was asking about. If it's like teachers standing, speaking to them, or if it's, a computer, some sort of computer presentation, or if it's paper, that's what I was asking about.
Mr. Carpenter, I'll speak as a parent at the dinner table. I know the curriculum that my daughter experienced and that Sherry and Jody Kelly worked on was live, and it elicited a lot of conversation at the dinner table coming home. And I don't think it was plug in a video and play. It was very much.
No, it's
I was asking
teacher-driven.
about the broadband program.
That's
Okay, just checking to make sure.
It's teacher, it's instruction. But the other part of what I liked about this, again, the most, is that teachers are being trained as trainers to teach their colleagues on implementation. And so for me, we need to build our capacity so that we don't just have a person that can implement something and it takes years for that to occur. We want to make sure we're building capacity quickly by offering, this kind of training, and as I said, the cost to have, this many people as trainers is really going to help build our capacity in each of the buildings.
Okay, how is this going to be implemented across years? If this is a grant just for this particular year, is it expected that the teachers are just going to take this period of time and each year the ones that are trained are going to be teaching these life skills? I mean, what is the plan going forward?
It would be
after this?
continuing. If, on one of the slides, it showed that it's a continuation. So, you know, in third grade, you're going to get it in fourth grade, you're going to get it in fifth grade, developmentally, you know, as you get older, it's developmentally appropriate. So, again, for me, the ability to have on-site trainers within this year to continue to build that capacity over the years is just substantial, which you typically don't get. Or
Yeah.
the cost is so prohibitive that, you know, you can't span it to the way that we want to span it.
Right, it was just, I guess, from the perspective more of cost that I was asking about going forward.
Well, there are no additional costs. We have all the materials as a result of this grant, and we have the trainers who can continue to train more and more people each year.
What about kids? This, you know, this is all about prevention, and I think this is important, as important, if not more so than treatment. I think both are. What about the kids that aren't covered? What about, for example, grades kindergarten through second? This starts in third grade. What about those grades?
Then we'll be looking, as we will, for a whole host of programs and curriculum for under the social emotional learning umbrella. So right now, this has the greatest span. So we will look to see how our little munchkins can also receive the benefit of, I'm not sure, the anti-addiction, because this is what we're really focused on right now, is anti-addiction. And there's just as prevention, if you read the literature, and Dr. Conrad, who is a developer in Canada of this program, she and I had a lengthy conversation about, you know, at what point for students learning is this beneficial for? And so, you know, she looked at, and she's done so many studies, she said the program really does not benefit students younger than 13. She says she's doing a trial right now for 12-year-olds in terms of treatment. But similar to, you know, curriculum, there's a point where, again, we're focusing on anti-addiction. So I'm not sure preschool or kindergartner that their cognitive ability would understand some of the concepts. So when they did their curriculum, and because it's evidence-based, they obviously looked at what is the age in which a student can learn the proper material to understand what the goal is. As I said, for example, you know, the first lesson of the third grade is tobacco, is understanding what that is, understanding what it does. So they look at it kind of developmentally and cognitively, at what point, you know, can a student learn. So I don't think, you know, pre-K, 1 or 2 perhaps are the appropriate grades for anti-addiction. You know, perhaps other elements of social emotional learning, which we would then continue to do our research and address.
Right.
Ms. Long, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
I just had a question for the thought then. What's your goal for how many trainers there will be? Like, at what rate will that work?
So the trainers, that would all happen this year.
And that was the 5, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so then as we move across each year, they would be training for implementation. So they would be doing modeling, they would be doing the sessions and modeling those sections, and as we go along, we'd be identifying where that would be taught, how it would be taught. That's actually part of the grant. So we need to, you know, develop that plan of what that looks like across the 4 schools.
One of my second questions was, how often do you know that the BOTVEN or the Preventure, they update that, their program, their curriculum, the books, things like that?
I don't have that answer. I'd have to, and I've been on the phone with them twice, but I would have to find out, you know, in terms of, you know, what their revised, you know, what their revision looks like.
Okay, and my third question would be, you had provided us with a lengthy list of all of the current social emotional programs that we do practice in the schools a few meetings back, which was very helpful. And I'm thinking of the program versus the curriculum question, and I know in some programs like the Responsive Classroom, that's something that the teachers practice every day.
Yes.
It's not necessarily 30 to 45 minutes out of the school, but it's just something that's naturally happening. It's in the language, it's in the behavior, it's in just kind of what they do in their normal classroom activity. Would BOTVEN be something, I know you were speaking about language and things like that, would BOTVEN be something that you would see breaking out and or maybe in the health curriculum as a part of the health curriculum or part of the PE curriculum in the younger grades?
I think so. I think that's the first place we might look, and then as the teachers develop the understanding and expectations of what we want kids to understand about drugs, to be able to have those conversations, to be able to, understand where students are coming from in their understanding, so that it kind of spans out across the whole school culture. But we would definitely want to target where it starts to kind of interface with things that we're already doing. And that's what we want.
So we have to take that 30 to 45-minute segment over time.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you so much for the report. It was great. I know it's a lot of work.
Mr. Russell.
Thanks, Melissa. A question, we've chatted about Botfin, which right at the moment is a 9C potential cut. What's the length of time that we find that's not going to happen? And meaning in the spring or late winter? Or what would be a plan B if in fact it is continued to be listed for a $14,000 cut? Would there be other options that we would explore?
My plan B is to actually put it into the Attorney General's grant that is out right now. That wasn't originally, when I looked at that of, kind of being able to maximize grants that are out there, I used one for the Botfin and the other for Preventure, just to maximize. However, there wasn't a cap on the Attorney General's grant. So my thinking is, or hope is, that I can take exactly what has been approved by the state already in this grant and put it into the Attorney General's grant with Preventure. And be able to, because that's a 2-year grant, in terms of, the 2 years, in terms of the longevity of it, we could easily be able to, work with it in that 2 years.
Ms. Ryder.
Okay, I only have a couple more questions. When you were speaking about the Botfin, like life skills training, and we were talking about the fact that it starts in 3rd grade, and you were saying that this is specifically anti-addiction, anti-opioid, that's what the grants are for. You had also earlier mentioned self-management and self-awareness. I mean, that's, we're looking at the 4 different prevention workshops for sensation-seeking, impulsivity, anxiety, sensitivity, and negative thinking. All of that starts or is prevented by self-management and self-awareness, and that definitely starts pre-K. So that part of it, pre-K to 2, I hope we have something else that would cover that.
Yes, that's what I think I spoke about that the last time and in this evening, that we will continue to look for what I call the breadth of social emotional learning curriculum and programs, and be able to identify students and their needs and put in place those specific programs that will actually address those needs. So nobody by any means is dismissing pre-K and K and 1st and 2nd grade at all, but we're still doing a lot of those other things under that social emotional learning realm, like social thinking and responsive classroom, and there's a lot of things that we are doing to support students for the social emotional learning, and we are building upon that. This area is it's new. It's new in terms of responsibility for the school district to look at that more deeply in understanding student needs. So that's why there's so much out there in terms of what's being tried and what's being done. And because there are so many needs, we have to find different ways in which to reach students and to ensure that they're healthy and ready for learning and succeeding. So of course our goal is always to pre-K post-grad for our 18 to 22-year-olds who we support here as well. So that will never be overlooked.
Just one question, one comment, and then I'm done. Sorry, I know I'm taking a long time, Brian. The feedback that I received from people at Chatham Elementary was that, just to mention something that our speaker, Ms. Goley, mentioned earlier, was that the Car Choice program was successful in that school, and that those teachers, some of the teachers had been quite, let's say, maybe not against, but they were really thinking, this is too young to be the kindergarten, pre-K. I think it was kindergarten that they thought, this program is not appropriate, they're too young to be learning this. And then after the program was finished, they were surprised that it actually was quite successful and really did help those kids. So I just thought I would make that comment. But specifically on the Preventer program, you say in here that kids are invited to participate in 2 90-minute group workshops, and then there's information about how the workshops help with treatment, but what if they don't take you up on the invitation?
Well, I mean, I think if that still becomes part of what's our response to intervention, it becomes part of our tiered, supports to students. So students aren't going to just fall through the crack. It's another way in which to offer supports to students, but we still have a pretty intensive tiered clinical support in each of the schools with our school psychologists and our guidance counselors. So again, it's another piece. And with that, being able to address needs at a level that isn't currently there, another level that's not currently there. So it's not that kids are going to not receive some type of treatment or recognition that they require supports. We have an incredible support network. And my time in the district here now, really appreciating is as much as the Cape has difficulty with service provision, especially down in this neck of the woods, what's available. There is still a lot of community support, and we are working with parents continually to access that community support. We're working with community support providers for students who are struggling. So our goal is to never miss a student, but to have enough available for what works for a student. That might not work for every student, but what we're hoping is because we have that and we're trained to provide it, that we're going to be able to reach more students with it.
Ms. Stout.
I have a request and a comment, and the request is on that paper that you're referring to that you gave us before about the different programs, I would like a copy of that lists like second step, what grades, if it's taught across second grade, that kind of thing, so I have a better idea of what things are.
One of my goals, most definitely, and I certainly couldn't tell you when I might get that to you, but is to develop with our teams a resource directory of the types of programs and supports that are available. And because what I presented didn't even capture everything that folks are doing, that was a quick, hi folks, can you give me some examples of what you're doing? So my goal is to have a resource directory of all of those things that are being done with a description and explanation of how those are implemented and for whom they're implemented.
I guess what I'm asking for is just something quick that just says where, like the teachers could in one day turn that in. And it wouldn't be a whole description of something, but I know.
I'm happy to put something together, but respecting teachers' time as well, and because that is one more thing. But I'm happy, and if I'm going to do it, I would like to do it that is a little bit more comprehensive, that people do understand it. So I appreciate that, but if I'm going to do it, I would like to do it in a way that's meaningful for people to understand what's happening.
I think it's important to remember, too, that it's our protocol for you to direct those requests through the superintendent, not directly to the
You're right.
administrators.
The other thing is, I just wanted to say thank you very much, because you alleviated my concern about that this was our only social skills kind of thing going on. I think that substance abuse prevention is really important. I went to school in Chatham. My kids went to school in Harwich. The alcohol problem, I don't know if it was worse or better, but overall, with all drugs, it's way worse. And every year, people would say, well, we're doing this and we're doing that. It sounded great, but it didn't make any difference. And so if this can make a difference, I'm thrilled. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for answering all my questions.
I'll take the last word, and thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Russell.
I don't know the appropriateness of it, and I know it's, social learning with all of our other commitments, time on learning is the elephant in the room. But we do have a pilot program in the Chatham Elementary that's ran for 2 years, Karma Choice. I know a little bit about it. happened to meet the director of the CHAPS to be here this evening. I wonder, and this is where the proponent comes in as the chair, and I'm looking at like 15 minutes of an explanation as to what it is, but maybe the coordinator and developer of the program might want to respond to Chatham Elementary experience that's been going on, or respond to our questions.
Great.
Yes, ma'am. Who are you directing that to?
Yourself, Mr. Chair.
So there's two people raising
Ms.
their
Armstrong, is there something? Did you want to?
Hi, I know you were asking many questions about life skills, and before you decide whether or not to move on to Karma Choice, I did want to just say this to all of you. I would be happy to invite any of you into my classroom to look at the materials that we have for life skills. They are not exclusively what we use currently for teaching health, but the materials are very well orchestrated for our students. But one of the things that I did want to echo is I'd invite you to come in and actually see the students engaging in the curricula, because they are very thought-provoking, they're very reflective in their responses, but it really addresses where they are in terms of their social and emotional health, which is surprising to me, because being new to teaching this particular curriculum, some of the statistics and some of the things that they feel and some of the things that they bring to class are very compelling. So we are utilizing this curriculum at the middle school right now. Again, as I said, we're not using it exclusively for our instruction, but I do invite you to come in. I'm happy to share those and to actually see it in action.
Ms. Russell, our agenda does not include a specific item
That's the
dealing with...
life skills, sorry. Botfin.
Botfin.
Mr. Russell, our agenda does not include a specific discussion of the issue of Calmer Choice. We do have the problem at times where there may be people who want to talk about a particular subject, and if we don't have it on our agenda, those people don't know enough to come here to be involved in it. On the other hand, there's somebody here who's in particular expert on it. And since it is somewhat tangentially related, and without limiting ourselves to a further, as to whether we would rather have a specific agenda item at a future date, because of your request, I'll stretch the interpretation of our protocol. If there is somebody that would like to give us a no longer than 5-minute presentation.
Brian, just one thing. Are we, for everyone else who's watching, I see that the TV's not working tonight. Are we not getting
I believe
recorded?
that's only, so, only means we can't see
Only means
ourselves.
okay, I just wanted to make sure it is live and recorded so that.
That's my understanding.
We had a snafu that I
good not
understand has
seeing
been corrected, but my text says it's back on, but the monitor feed is not showing in the library.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so first of all, Mr. Russell, thank you, everybody. I was not expecting to speak. I had seen the agenda, and actually I wanted to say, is it Melissa? I would actually love a time to sit down with you at some point. And as far as Botfin, it's an amazing program, and I think part of what you said about it, there needing to be multiple programs, Calmer Choice, Botfin, they're a perfect fit, same thing with Responsive Classroom. To address exactly, we have been at Chatham Elementary School. Sorry, I'm Fiona Jensen, and I'm Executive Director of Calmer Choice.
Thank you.
And we have been at Chatham Elementary School for 2 years, and actually, interestingly, we were at the middle school when Lisa Sojourn was there, and we did actually research with some 5th grade students at that school with Tufts University. That was back 4 years or so ago. The program at Chatham, the first year we went in, we did just 4 classrooms. We did, I think, at kindergarten, first, second, and third. And it, again, it was before Robin was there, and it seemed to be successful. The parents were pleased, the teachers were pleased. The following year, the PTA actually raised the money in order for us to be there, along with the Chatham Fund through the Cape Cod Foundation also funded it. And our experience, again, from talking to parents and talking to the teachers, was that it was a successful program. We didn't do any research ourselves there because we were working at that point with Yale, with middle school students at Mattakees Middle School, so we didn't actually do any research there. We did do a survey at the end with some of the teachers to find out feedback from the teachers. We got some of those feedback forms, which actually we shared with Robin at the end of the year, because she had said that you guys were looking for some data. We didn't get a lot of feedback back. We also didn't realize that that information was going to be used at the school committee level, or we would have made it way more imperative that the teachers get the information back to us. Our experience has been that we are not evidence-based. We've been working with Yale for 4 years. There's 2 papers in the pipeline. Part of the issue with becoming evidence-based is you need to have 2 peer-reviewed journals out there before it can become, you can be a part of the SAMHSA program. So we are what's been considered a promising program. We've researched over 1,000 students on the Cape, and actually, interestingly, if you look at the evidence-based programs for responsive classroom or second step, the number of students researched are a much lower level than what we've done here. Part of it is we've been holding ourselves to the medical model as far as doing the research. So I'm happy to, what I would actually love to do, if the committee is interested, is to actually be part of the agenda and actually provide you with a presentation of some of our results that we've had across the Cape, because we've worked with over 13,000 children now. We're in 18 different schools. Our model, honestly, is the trainer. It takes time. And then the last piece is that we are very, very willing to help raise the money, very willing to write grants. We bring in over $300,000 worth of grants that we then turn around and provide for schools, so that it's never an expectation that the school come up with the entire program. And we have, both DY and Falmouth now have, Falmouth got a $100,000 grant from the Tower Foundation to take their 4 elementary schools from dependence to independence. And that's something, honestly, our goal is to get out of the building. But it does take a couple of years in order to do that, in order to train people to do what we've done. So anyway, I'm done. I'm really happy to be here. And what I would love, if the committee would be interested, is for us to come in and actually do a presentation. And I would love to sit down and meet with you. And I actually brought a copy of our curriculum in the crosswalk with SEL and Massachusetts Curricular Frameworks for Health, which we've aligned our curriculum with. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is the update on strategic plan progress. Ms. Blanchard, Dr. Blanchard, excuse me.
Okay, good evening. And we're going to talk about strategic plan updates for strategic objectives 1A, 3A, and 3B as requested. And those are strategic objectives that deal with, look at our close reading, differentiated instruction, and balanced literacy. So the first strategic initiative is 1A, emphasizing close reading and writing from sources across all disciplines. And we're looking at action step number 2, which is design performance task assessments focused on close reading and writing from sources. And this is specifically targeted toward elementary and middle school. Those of you who've been on the committee for several years now might recall that when we were building the district curriculum and bringing the 2 districts together, we designed performance task assessments across all grade levels and all content areas as part of our way of unifying the districts. And so we have many performance task assessments in the district. I'm going to focus on the close reading and also to talk about how we're revising and developing new performance tasks. So at the elementary level, the elementary teachers have organized their curriculum into 6 learning pathways, and this is focused on their close reading and literacy blocks. Each area, each pathway is a unit that has, the teachers have identified 4 anchor texts for the close reading lessons, and currently teachers are continuing to develop progression of skills and common performance tasks for assessment of those skills. So when you, for example, studying a person, It's not a specific person, and the unit doesn't measure a skill on that content of that person necessarily. It's how to study a person, how to study a time in history, how to study a topic. And so those are the skills through the Common Core and Massachusetts frameworks that the teachers are developing. And so in an effort to align the two elementary schools that might have different resources, but obviously are teaching to the same skills, we're working on aligning the progression of those skills and the performance tasks to assess those skills so that when teachers get together from the two elementary schools, they're on the same page, pun intended. This is just a small example of some of the things that are going on in the middle school. I tried to rate them from 5th grade on down, and as you can see, it's science, English, social studies, and then some. The very last bullet is a very exciting project that is happening at the middle school. We're developing student learning projects for students in all grade levels, and we'll be updating you on that in another strategic update, because I'm hoping that some of the teachers will come. As a matter of fact, Mr. Sumner is one of those teachers on that team who will be able to share with you what those service learning projects are going to look like. Additional steps, this is really looking at the strategic plan. In this specific initiative, we had put into the out years, but we're actually starting to do this now. We've developed a district writing committee who is working on vertical alignment of performance tasks for each type of writing, the 3 types of writing, and we're getting this document together to make sure that there are no gaps in the instruction of writing and the performance tasks for those types of writing. We're working on common writing rubrics, which exist at the middle and high school level, need to be kind of tweaked. We're also waiting for the next generation MCAS rubrics to come out so we can align to that. The team will also work on a common writing process and common language for teaching writing. And then, as you know, in your strategic plan, in the district strategic plan, in the out years, this work will then start to generate some student exemplars, and we can work on calibration so that we're assessing these performance tests in a common way. The next strategic initiative is to improve differentiated learning for all individuals. And I think I could just say Mr. Wilson and sit down, because he did such a great job of demonstrating the really important piece of differentiated instruction. So the action step number 4 is what the update is on, and it's about how we're training teachers in the system on differentiated instruction approaches. So going back to what Mr. Wilson shared with you, the important thing to understand about differentiated instruction, it's not a training that you sit and you learn and then you walk away. It's embedded in everything that you do. It's a process. It's how you conduct your lessons, how you address student learning, and it's constant. So anytime we have a training, whether it's a math and focus or some other training, there's always differentiated instruction in that training, because you're always learning how to meet the needs of the struggling learners and how to push the needs of the students who are ready for enrichment. So teachers differentiate instruction through content, process, product, and environment according to their students' readiness and interests and learning profiles, using a variety of strategies. I always refer to it as a toolbox, and you're constantly adding tools to that toolbox as you go through your professional career. Some of the trainings that we've had in the district that address specifically differentiation. We have 107 staff members who have gone through the 45-hour SCI endorsement course. That's Sheltered English Immersion. The course is referred to oftentimes as retail. Those of you with educators in your families might have heard people talking about retail. Retail stands for the rethinking of equity and teaching English language learners. That course is rich with differentiated instructional strategies. As you'll see in another slide, we're going to do a continuation in district, kind of a next steps that we're designing for the strategies that teachers learn in that course, just to kind of refresh. The organization that we gives us our measures of academic progress assessments. We trained all of our instructional leaders and department heads in how to read those reports. And again, Mr. Wilson demonstrated the richness of that tool and how those reports can help teachers to visually see their classroom immediately and know how to group their students based on their needs, and then dive deeper into what those specific needs are. Another piece of that measures of academic progress tool that we have is called Skills Navigator, and we have trained all of our interventionists and special education teachers in using that tool, and that is for taking students who need reteaching or intervention, and some of the teachers who are doing some of the seminar blocks will be using that tool. You can customize instruction for students. They go on. There's some learning videos or games to help them to learn the concepts, and then there are 6 quick questions, and if they get 5 of those questions correct, I think it's 4 of 6, they move on. As soon as they get 2 wrong, it shuts down. The teacher gets the data, and they know exactly where to dive back in on the learning. We have, as you know, been doing math and focus training all year, starting in September. We had another training in November. They're coming back in January, and they're coming back again in March for training. And that program is rich with differentiated instruction. There are reteaching manuals, there are enrichment manuals, and again, differentiated instruction is always happening, and so whenever you're in a training, you're always learning how to meet the needs of all your learners. Our work with Nancy Boyles in our close reading at the elementary school, specifically small group instruction, which is how to differentiate the needs of your students. Our service learning training, we have 28 staff members who went through that training in the middle school, and they are primed and ready to create service learning projects that will meet the needs of all learners. This summer, we trained 25 staff in visions training, which is specifically meeting looking at issues of diversity in the classroom and how to ensure that what you are creating in your lessons and units take into consideration the diversity of your students in every sense of the word. We are working with Dr. Mag Gaffoon through a Tower grant on multi-tiered systems of supports, which again, among other things, combines the social emotional learning, the PBIS, universal design for learning, and all of those components that help support all learners. And every year we revisit the educator evaluation system and focus on standards 1 and 2, which deal with creating curriculum and units that meet the needs of all students, and standard 2 is teaching all students. So we're constantly revisiting that tool and looking at the standards and how we can meet them. We do have some future trainings in the short term. We have applied for a Title III grant, which is the English Language Learner Grant, and as I said, we have someone on staff who will be offering a course, extending the learning, which takes the differentiated instruction that was taught in that retail SCI endorsement course and allows teachers to earn 15 professional development points that they need for their recertification in every 5-year cycle. We also will be offering in-district courses. One specifically will be offered by Ms. McGuire, hopefully in the next semester on inclusive practices for those special education 15 professional development points for recertification. Nancy Boyles is coming back in March, and then I'm confident that we will re-up with her in for one more year. She will have, she's been here a year, almost 2 years, and she's established a wonderful relationship with the teachers, gotten to know them really well, gotten to know their curriculum, their teaching styles, and her feedback has been wonderful. Again, we have 2 more Math and Focus trainings that are scheduled for this year, and then we'll stop and see what the teachers need going forward. And then we're going to be having another round of our MAP training, which is the NWEA organization, and that is specifically the differentiated training that takes that data from the measures of academic progress and says, now, how do you bring it into the classroom to inform instruction? So that's happening in February. The last strategic initiative update is on our balanced reading and action step number 1, build teacher capacity in reading instruction. So again, we've been working with Dr. Nancy Boyles for 2.5 years, or actually, we're in our second of 3 years. All teachers in the elementary school were trained. We've provided resources and texts for them on that training. She worked all last year at grade levels and did model lessons, a lot of breakout sessions where she could meet with the teachers and give feedback, look over their resources. Doing the same thing this year, grade level trainings and then model lessons, and she's now helping with that performance task development and the alignment of those skills. Last year, through the Student Services Office, the special education teachers worked on reading instruction with Dr. Ilda King. The next steps for our literacy work will be, with Dr. Boyles, will be doing some classroom observations starting in next year. That's not observations in an evaluative process. It's observations by just sitting there and seeing if the instruction is working and then giving some feedback and continuing with curriculum alignment. We really want to make sure that the elementary schools are doing similar things at similar times. We have identified some needs in our literacy work. We have a need for purchasing some additional level texts for small group instruction. That's the close read. We need to build up some of our informational texts, and again, some of this can be done through online sources. And both elementary principals would love to start to build a guided reading library week. Dr. Boyles has given us some short-term, kind of less expensive ways to work on the guided reading library, and so as we go into budget season, we can look and see what we have available. Nothing new, but we have available. So that's the update on those 3 strategic initiatives.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Ryder.
Just one. What is NWEA? I missed
Sorry,
what you said.
Northwest Education Association, that's the company that owns MAP, Measures of Academic Progress. Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Mr. Russell.
Donna, thank you for setting this up.
You're welcome.
Continue the good work.
All right. Anybody else?
I was just going to add, the training for the teachers, it seems so impressive. I don't know, that's great. I think it will be a great answer to our test scores.
Let the record reflect Ms. Richardson is happy.
She's almost speechless.
Thank you.
Happy night tonight.
Thank you very much. Fiscal 2018 budget discussions. Is there anything new, Mr. Carpenter?
I don't think there's anything new when it comes to FY18. Although I do think we still have to see what the rest of the fallout is from the $98 million in cuts that have been proposed and put on the table. One of the things that FY 18 is built on is that that the Chapter 70 funds and that that the various funds that are coming into the district this year are continue and are level funded for next year. So so we have sort of the first page of the presentation Katie gave last week is really about assumptions, and we haven't heard how or if any of those assumptions will change, but that's what will come probably over the course of our next weeks and as we head into our January meetings. I've had a meeting with Chris Clark over in Harwich, and I was just chatting with Mike McCaskill before this meeting, suggesting that the chairs and the town manager and myself get together and that we'd have that same conversation in Chatham, just to sort of talk where we are with regard to our budgets. And I shared with the town manager the presentation that we made last week in terms of what our wants and hopes are. We talked about, I talked with them about the presentation that was, here's the list of things that we know we must have, contractually, and here are the things that we really curricularly need, and then things that we hope to be able to do within the district in that want column that included things like an additional bus, a VIPS coordinator, and some other sort of staffing issues.
Thank you. Ms. Stout.
Sort of a tangent to this, but it has to do with money. Do you know if the superintendents have ever gotten together or communicated to try to, and Mr. McCaskill, for the selectmen even, I don't know, to let the Congress people know that how things work at the local levels, because these, especially, they should be considering our budget before they do their budget, instead of having it go the opposite way. This sounds ridiculous, but they are our representatives.
Or too logical, Sharon.
Well, still, they can be voted out if they don't do that. It's just so, I've seen mid-year cuts before, but also when we don't know till it gets past our budget time, it's, it's a terrible way to do things.
Well, I think it's a good point. We do have, I forget the date in January, but at our next meeting I'll share it. We have the annual legislative breakfast that happens at the Cape Cod Collaborative, where a number of our legislators do come and have breakfast with us, and the superintendents and school committee members do go and have an exchange. We actually, I'm the chair of the Cape Islands Superintendents Association. We monthly meet, and yesterday I was in contact with Jillian Sears, scheduler, and he will be joining us at our next meeting to sort of hear from us where we are, what our needs are. But we do reach out and have individual conversations, and we have group powwows as a group of superintendents.
Sharon, that'll be your chance to meet the legislatures.
Yeah, I've done that before, but I'll do it again.
Back them up against the wall. Subcommittee reports. Are there any subcommittees that wish to give a report? Nothing new. Okay.
You could give the chairman authority to Sharon to speak to the legislators when she goes.
I think she should say to them exactly what she just said.
I'll talk to Jillian. We need to talk to the governor.
Yeah.
Superintendent's report.
I'll be, as we go into the new year, I'll be putting just more and more reminders out to families that we had a decision at the table here, like roughly a little less than a year ago, that we would be switching or essentially flipping school start times. One of the things in the budget that's an important help to that is we built into the budget an additional bus. At the moment, if start times. It takes our buses from 7 o'clock in the morning till 8:55 to deliver all of the students, or to pick up all the students and deliver them to school. And the hope is that an additional bus, and working with our transportation company, Cape Destinations, that we can shrink that total amount of time. And my hope is that we can hear back from Cape Destinations, and Katie and I will work with them by our last meeting in January to have a feel for what with an additional bus, what will that length of transportation time be, because that will then dictate when we can actually say, okay, and formally let parents know, elementary school will start at this specific time, the middle and high schools will start at this specific time. So, we want to, last year we talked about striving to have our schools start, roughly around 8 o'clock, and to have the high school and middle school start roughly around 8:30 if possible. Of course, the challenge is, what's the turnaround time, when at the moment it takes about 45 minutes for those runs, to help also in that effort. And I think this kind of came out of one of the conversations that we were having on busing. I'll be having a series of meetings that I'll be scheduling with families and just reaching out to them. So what we put on the calendar so far, and we'll communicate out, is that I'll have a meeting at Chatham Elementary on January 10th, which is a Tuesday, in the evening at 6:30, and then January 11th, which is a Wednesday, at Harwich Elementary, the middle school, January 19th, which is a Thursday, at the high school, January 25th, which is a Wednesday, the first day of the exam period. And each of those at 6:30, and then we'll try to have some other, we'll call it less formal meeting at some establishment, if they'll put up with me, in one of our two towns, and maybe parents might be more inclined to come to a less formal gathering, just to share, but to get some feedback on how they can get more involved. But I think also to tag team on some of the things. I think Jackie kind of mentioned about, what if we talk to parents about how they might be able to help with the busing situation, in terms of seeing more neighborhood stops, particularly at the elementary level, and less sort of door-to-door, because the door-to-door is what tends to go and makes some of these bus routes incredibly long. And if we want to really sort of shrink the total time that kids are on buses, and to try to have that turnaround time fall within the parameters, it's going to take more than just adding a bus. It's going to take really cooperation of a community to go make that happen. So that's to come in January.
So for example, maybe a parent could walk a little bit further down the road and meet with other parents. And
correct, yeah.
And Mr. Russell, as a child, had to walk 5 miles. So
both ways.
Yeah, that's right.
In the snow, no boots.
Back in the day, when I was in elementary school, I lived in a neighborhood called Singletree Lane, and everybody in Singletree Lane head out, and we all got the bus together. The odd thing was, I distinctly remember we all were standing out there together, and we weren't in our parents' cars, because but I think that's sort of like the new thing, is that everybody's out at the end of their neighborhood, and there's a whole bunch of cars parked there. In fact, I think we had a bus challenge where there's so many parent cars parked that the bus was having trouble kind of getting in. So, but times change.
Waited under the single tree, no doubt. Anything else? We don't have any action items tonight, so I guess at this time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and go into an executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Adjourn and go into executive session.
I would second that.
We'll take a vote. Ms. Richardson?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Stout? Mr. Duval? Aye. Mr. Russell? Aye. Ms. Long? Aye. Ms. Ryder? Chairman votes aye. The School committee will go into an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to custodial contract, collective bargaining units, and MREA Channel 22 stipend, and we will not return to regular meeting. Thank you very much. So close. So close.
But no cigar.
But no cigar.